The tea had gone cold again. He noticed it the way I notice most things these days, slowly, distantly, like the information had to travel a long way before it reached me. He wrapped both hands around the cup anyway, grateful for even the faint warmth that remained. Outside the kitchen window, the maple trees lining our street in Westbrook had turned the brilliant crimson and gold of early November. Leaves drifted down in slow, lazy spirals across the front yard. Margaret had loved this time of year. She used to wake up before me every single morning. He never once understood how a woman who stayed up reading until midnight could be brought out at 5:30 de la mañana. By the time I shuffled into the kitchen, there would always be a small note card propped against the kettle. Sometimes it was a shopping reminder. Sometimes it was a quote she'd copied from a book. Sometimes it was just 3 words in her elegant, flowing handwriting, "Good morning, Robert." He still looked for those note cards every morning. 3 years later, I still looked. The chair across from me sat empty the way it had sat empty for me 95 days. He had counted in those first terrible months. He had stopped counting somewhere around day 500 when the counting started to feel like something that was eating me alive from the inside. The silence in that house was something I had never quite gotten used to. Every creak of the floorboards, every settling of the old foundation, every gust of wind against the windows, they all sounded like her footsteps, like her voice calling from another room. I would catch myself turning my head at the slightest sound, expecting to see her walking through the doorway with that warm smile and a fresh cup of tea in her hand. But she never came. She never would come again. That was what I had told myself every single day for 3 years. The notification slip from the Westbrook Central Post Office sat on the table beside my teacup. It had been pushed under the front door when I came downstairs, a standard yellow slip, the kind that meant a package was waiting for pickup. I picked it up, read it twice, and felt nothing in particular. Jessica had mentioned something about ordering me a new set of gardening tools last week. Probably that. She was always ordering things for the house, always making sure I had everything I needed. She had taken over so much of the practical running of my life after Margaret passed. He had been grateful for it. He had been too hollowed out by grief to argue, too exhausted to insist on handling things myself. Jessica had been my rock. She had been the one who found me in the hospital waiting room that terrible morning, who held my hand and told me it would be okay even though we both knew it wouldn't be. She had organized the memorial service, handled the calls from relatives, dealt with all the paperwork that seemed to multiply endlessly in the weeks after Margaret's death. She had been everything a daughter could be. He had never doubted her for a moment. He pulled on my coat, picked up my keys, and drove the 15 minutes to the post office on Oak Street without thinking about much at all. The roads were familiar. The route was automatic. I had driven this same path hundreds of times over the years, to pick up packages, to mail birthday cards to Emily in Chicago, to send care packages to Jessica when she was in graduate school. The streets of Westbrook had become so familiar to me over 40 years that I could navigate them in my sleep. He probably had, on some of those long, sleepless nights when sleep refused to come and I found myself driving through the empty streets at 2 de la mañana, trying to outrun the memories that haunted me. The lobby smelled the way post offices always smell, like old paper and rubber bands and the particular staleness of a government building that had been recycling its air since 1985. There were 3 people ahead of me in line. I waited, checked my phone out of habit, found nothing that needed my attention, and put it away. The elderly gentleman in front of me was arguing loudly about a package that had been delivered to the wrong address. The young woman behind me was bouncing impatiently on her heels, clutching a stack of envelopes that looked like they should have been mailed weeks ago. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling strangely detached, like I was watching everything from a great distance. When I reached the counter, the clerk who stepped forward from the back room was not one of the regular staff I recognized. It was an older man, perhaps 75 or so, with a full head of silver white hair and the kind of deeply lined face that suggested he had spent a great deal of his life outdoors. He wore a plain gray jacket over a plaid shirt, and he moved with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who had long since stopped being in a rush about anything. There was something about him that seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. Maybe I had seen him at the post office before. Maybe he was just one of those faces that reminded you of someone else. Mr. Harrison, he said. He was mildly surprised he knew my name before I'd said it. That's me. I've been expecting you. He reached beneath the counter and produced a small parcel, a padded envelope roughly the size of a hardback book, sealed with brown packing tape. Then from the breast pocket of his jacket, he withdrew a second item, a plain white envelope, letter-sized, sealed. He placed both on the counter in front of me. His hands were steady as he set them down, but I noticed a slight tremor in his fingers, as though he was nervous about something. Or perhaps he was simply old. Old hands trembled sometimes. That was normal. My name is Arthur Connolly, he said. I'm an old friend of the family. He looked at the man more carefully. I don't think we've been met. No, Arthur said, and something moved briefly across his face. Not quite sadness, not quite guilt, but something in that territory. We haven't. Margaret felt it was better that way, for a time. He pushed both items gently toward me. She asked me to hold these and to deliver them to you personally, today specifically. She was very clear about the date. My hand reached out and touched the edge of the white envelope before my brain had entirely caught up with what was happening. The handwriting on the front was Margaret's. I would have recognized it anywhere, that elegant, slightly slanted script she'd developed in her years of teaching literature. Every letter formed with the deliberate precision of someone who believed that how you wrote something mattered as much as what you wrote. It said only, Robert. She left this with you. Quite some time ago, Arthur said. She made arrangements well in advance. He hesitated, then added, she trusted you to know what to do with it. He wanted to ask more. Who he was, how exactly he had known Margaret, what he meant by well in advance. But when I looked up from the envelope, Arthur Connolly was already stepping back from the counter with a small, careful nod. Take good care of yourself, Mr. Harrison, he said. And then he turned and walked back through the door to the mail room, and he was gone. He stood at the counter for a moment that felt much longer than it probably was. The sealed envelope in one hand and the padded parcel in the other, while the postal worker at the next window loudly explained to an elderly customer why her tracking number wasn't showing up in the system. The sounds of the post office faded into a dull roar in my ears. All I could focus on was the familiar handwriting on that envelope, the way the letters curved and slanted just the way they had on every note card she had ever left for me. He walked to my cab. I sat down in the driver's seat. I set both items on the passenger seat and stared at them. The padded envelope had a slight weight to it, dense and rectangular, like it contained a small external hard drive. The white envelope was light. Almost nothing. Almost nothing except for Margaret's handwriting on the front. Robert. My hands were trembling, a fine continuous tremor that I could not seem to stop, as I broke the seal on the white envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her handwriting filled the page. My eyes went straight to the first line, and the world outside the car, the parking lot, the traffic on Oak Street, the whole ordinary Wednesday morning, fell completely away. Robert, go to the old tea house alone. Don't tell Jessica. Don't tell anyone. Not until you've heard everything. Read the line 4 times. Don't tell Jessica. Of all the things Margaret might have written to me, of all the messages she might have left, why would she specifically name our daughter? Why, out of every person in my life, had she felt the need to single out Jessica? My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the slow, nauseating arrival of a feeling I could not yet name. It was a feeling that sat heavy in my stomach, cold and unwelcome, like the first sign of an illness you knew would get worse before it got better. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and held it against my sternum with both hands. Outside, a gust of November wind sent a cascade of crimson leaves skittering across the hood of my car. Margaret had loved this time of year, and somehow, impassively, it seemed, she still had something left to say. Something she had not been able to say while she was alive. Something she had trusted a stranger to deliver to me years after her death. What could possibly be so important? What could she have needed to tell me that she couldn't tell me before she left? He sat there in the parking lot for a long time, the engine idling, the heater blowing warm air across my face, the letter pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. He thought about Margaret. He thought about the way she used to laugh, had thrown back, eyes crinkled at the corners, the sound of it filling whatever room she was in. I thought about the way she used to reach for my hand in the middle of the night, even in her sleep, her fingers finding mine like they were drawn by some invisible force. He thought about the last time I saw her, pale and thin in that hospital bed, her voice barely above a whisper, telling me she loved me, telling me to take care of the girls, telling me she would always be with me even when I couldn't see her. I had believed her. He still believed her. But this letter was something else entirely. This was not a message from beyond the grave meant to comfort me. This was a warning. A directive. A call to action that I did not understand but somehow knew I had to follow. He started the car and drove home. The house was quiet when I walked through the front door. It was always quiet now, but this quiet felt different, heavier, more charged, like the silence before a thunderstorm. He hung my coat on the hook by the door, the same hook I had been using for 40 years, and walked into the kitchen. The teacup was still on the table, the tea now completely cold, a thin film forming on the surface. He poured it down the sink and set the cup in the dishwasher without really thinking about what I was doing. He went straight to my study. It was the room Margaret and I had built together over 40 years of marriage. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 2 walls filled with her collection of classic literature and my collection of history books, the old oak desk I refused to replace even though the varnish had worn through in several places, the framed photograph on the wall above the monitor that showed the two of us at the Grand Canyon in 1992, young and sunburned and laughing at something I could no longer remember. He set the padded envelope on the desk. My hands were still trembling as I reached for the tape and carefully peeled it back. Inside it was a small black external hard drive roughly the size of a deck of cards, wrapped in a layer of bubble wrap. Taped to the bubble wrap was a second note card in Margaret's handwriting. It said, "The password is the day we met. You remember? You always remembered better than you thought you did. The day we met. August 12, 1979. I had been 24 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in history, newly arrived in Westbrook from Boston with 2 suitcases and no particular plan. Margaret had been sitting in a corner booth at the Willow Tree Tea House on Elm Street, surrounded by books and nursing a cup of Earl Grey that had clearly been there for hours. He had asked if the seat across from her was taken. She had looked up at me with those intelligent green eyes and said, "It is now apparently," and gone back to her book. He had fallen completely in love with her in approximately the next 45 seconds. He plugged the drive into my laptop. The password prompt appeared. My fingers hovered over the keyboard and for a moment my throat tightened so fiercely that I had to press my fist against my sternum and breathe deliberately, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The way the grief counselor had taught me in those first awful months. Type 08121979. The drive unlocked. The folder structure that appeared on my screen was meticulous, organized with the same careful precision Margaret applied to everything she touched. Dozens of subfolders, each clearly labeled, financial records, email archives, video files, audio files, a folder simply titled "Read This First." My cursor moved toward "Read This First," then stopped because the thumbnail image on the very first video file in the main directory had loaded, and I was looking at Margaret's face. Not Margaret as I had last seen her, pale and diminished in the hospital bed, her voice barely above a whisper. This Margaret had color in her cheeks. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut in a style I didn't recognize. She was sitting somewhere with plain white walls behind her and she was looking directly into the camera with an expression I knew well. The particular focused intensity she wore when she was about to explain something important and needed to make sure she had your full attention. The timestamp in the corner of the thumbnail read 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago the breath left my body like I had been struck in the chest. My hands flew to my mouth. My eyes burned with sudden violent tears that I did not try to stop. They spilled down my face and onto the desk. And I did not care at all because Margaret had been dead for 3 years. And 4 weeks ago, she had been sitting in front of a camera with color in her cheeks and that focused expression she wore when she had something important to say. And I did not understand anything about what was happening. But I understood that nothing in my life would be the same after tonight. "Margaret," I said out loud, to no one, to the empty study, to the photograph on the wall. My voice cracked down the middle like old wood. "Margaret, what did you do?" The phone on my desk rang. I wiped my face roughly with the back of my hand, dragged in a shaking breath, and looked at the screen. Jessica. My daughter, my Saturday visits, 6:30 phone calls, manages all my paperwork. Daughter calling at, I checked the clock, 4:17 pulgadas the afternoon, 2 hours and 13 minutes earlier than she ever called. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my back teeth. He picked up the phone. He made my voice into something level and ordinary, the way I used to make my face into something calm when Jessica was small and frightened during thunderstorms, because children needed to believe their fathers were not afraid. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. "Dad," her voice was warm, easy, the voice of a woman who had absolutely nothing on her mind. "How was your day?" "Listen, I was just thinking, did you happen to pick up anything unusual from the post office today?" My eyes moved from the phone to the laptop screen to Margaret's face and that thumbnail to the timestamp that read 4 weeks ago. "Just some old paperwork," I said. "Nothing interesting." "Oh, good," Jessica said. And if I had not been sitting in that study with Margaret's hard drive open on my screen and Margaret's letter in my coat pocket and my face still wet from crying, I might have believed her completely. "Just checking. You know how I worry." "I know you do," I said. "I'll talk to you tonight, sweetheart." He ended the call and set the phone face down on the desk. Then I opened the folder marked "Read This First" and I began. Margaret had always been the most organized person I had ever known. In 40 years of marriage, I had never once seen her lose a document, misplace a receipt, or fail to find something she had filed away. She kept records the way some people kept grudges, thoroughly, persistently, and with an attention to detail that bordered on the obsessive. He used to tease her about it. He used to say that if anything ever happened to me, the paramedics would find a color-coded binder in the kitchen drawer containing my entire medical history, sorted by date. She had applied that same meticulous precision to uncovering the truth about our daughter. The folder marked "Read This First" contained a single audio file, an attached document, and a reading guide Margaret had created with instructions to go through the evidence in a specific order. She had numbered everything. She had written brief explanations at the top of each section so I would understand what I was looking at before I looked at it. She had even included a note at the very beginning that said, "Take breaks if you need them. This is going to be hard. I'm sorry." He did not take any breaks. He started with the emails. There were 53 of them spanning 18 months between an account registered to j.harrison.cross and an account registered to AC. Wellington at a domain called strategic-investments.com. Samuel Wellington, a name I had heard exactly once in passing when Jessica mentioned attending a business conference in Atlanta the previous spring. She had described him as a colleague, a contact, someone who might be useful for her consulting firm. What the emails described was something considerably different. The language was careful, the way people write when they are aware that what they are saying should not exist in writing, but cannot resist putting it in writing anyway. References to the consulting arrangement and our mutual friend in accounting and the timeline we discussed. But Margaret had included a separate document, a translation essentially, that decoded what each phrase actually meant based on the financial records she had cross-referenced alongside them. The consulting arrangement meant 9 shell companies registered to my home address. Each one billing fictitious consulting fees to a network of Wellington's corporate entities. The fees flowed through cryptocurrency exchanges, through offshore accounts, through a labyrinth of transactions that had been specifically engineered to be difficult to trace. The total amount that had moved through these channels in 18 months was $84 million. $84 million processed through companies that listed Robert James Harrison as their founding technical consultant. Signed with my digital signature, a signature I had never provided, attached to documents I had never seen, authorizing transactions I had never approved. My stomach dropped so far and so fast that I had to push back from the desk and press my hands flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking. In the United States, wire fraud using electronic communications to execute a financial scheme carries a federal prison sentence of up to 20 years per count. Identity theft adds a mandatory consecutive prison sentence for each count. On top of that, the documents on this drive had my name on dozens of transactions. If someone wanted to build a case, they had everything they needed, and every piece of paper pointed directly at me. That had been the plan. He understood that now with a cold, nauseating clarity. If the scheme was ever discovered, the paper trail would lead to Robert Harrison, retired history professor, grieving widower, elderly man who perhaps had not been thinking clearly since his wife passed. Jessica and Wellington would express shock and concern. They would cooperate fully with investigators. They would have no idea how any of this had happened. He scrolled to the financial records. Margaret had pulled my retirement account statements going back 4 years, statements I had never personally reviewed because Jessica had offered to handle all of that after Margaret died, and I had been too hollowed out by grief to argue. What I saw in those statements made the shaking in my hands travel up through my arms and into my chest. Systematic withdrawals, small enough individually that no single transaction would trigger an automatic fraud alert, large enough collectively to have reduced my retirement savings by nearly 45% over 32 months. She took it, I said out loud, and my voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger. She actually took it. Then I opened the video files. Margaret had recorded herself on 8 separate occasions, seated in front of the same plain white wall, speaking directly to camera with the calm and methodical delivery of someone giving expert testimony. In the first video, dated 22 months ago, she explained how she had first become suspicious. She had glanced over Jessica's shoulder at a laptop screen and seen an account number she didn't recognize attached to what appeared to be Robert's digital signature. In the second video, she walked through how she had obtained the financial records. In the third, she described confronting Jessica indirectly, asking careful questions, watching her daughter's reactions, noting the answers that came too quickly and the ones that came too slowly. In the fourth video, Margaret's voice was different, quieter, less composed. I found the power of attorney document last Tuesday, she said, and I had to lean forward in my chair because her voice had dropped so low. It's a forgery. Someone replicated my signature. You don't know how. Perhaps from a document I signed years ago and they used it to create a financial power of attorney that gives Jessica full legal authority over Robert's accounts in the event that he is determined to be mentally incapacitated. She paused and I watched her jaw tighten on the screen. There is also a psychiatric evaluation report. It was prepared 14 months ago by a doctor I have never heard of, and it describes Robert as exhibiting early signs of cognitive decline and diminished financial judgment. Anoter pause. Robert is one of the sharpest men I have ever known. He has never in 40 years exhibited a single sign of cognitive decline. This document is a fabrication. They have been building this for a long time. He pressed my fist against my mouth so hard that my knuckles went white. They have been planning to have me declared incompetent. Legally, a valid power of attorney combined with a psychiatric evaluation could give Jessica the authority to control every financial decision I made, every account, every asset, every transaction, while I sat in my house believing my daughter was taking care of me. The fifth video was dated 8 months ago. Margaret looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with illness. I found the email last night, she said. The one that says, handle it whatever it takes. I've been trying to tell myself it doesn't mean what it sounds like. I've been trying to convince myself that Jessica would not, that she is still underneath all of this, still my daughter. Her voice broke on the last word just slightly, and she stopped and pressed her lips together until she had it under control again. I don't think I can convince myself of that anymore. The sixth video began, and Margaret opened her mouth to speak, and then the file ended. Not faded out, not concluded, ended abruptly, mid-breath, as though someone had reached into the recording and torn the last page away. The screen went black. He clicked on the file again, checked the file size, checked the duration. The video had been edited. Someone had deleted the final portion. Someone had gotten there before me. I sat in my study with the cold tea and Margaret's evidence spread across my laptop screen. And for the first time since I had pulled out of the post office parking lot that morning, I felt something sharpen inside me, cut through the grief and the disbelief and the physical nausea of what I had just read and become something harder and colder and more purposeful. They had stolen from me. They had forged my name. They had built a cage around me so carefully that I had lived inside it for 3 years without ever knowing the bars were there. And Margaret had known. Margaret had been gathering the key. Outside my study window, the November darkness had settled completely over Westbrook. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked twice and went quiet. My phone sat face up on the corner of the desk. And as I stared at it, the screen lit up with a text message from Jessica. just thinking about you, Dad. Sleep well tonight. Love you. My jaw clenched so tight that I felt it in my temples. He set the phone face down without responding and turned back to the laptop. There was still one folder I had not opened. It was labeled in Margaret's careful handwriting, the night Jessica came to the hospital. He moved my cursor toward it and clicked. The folder contained a single video file. He pressed play. Margaret appeared on screen, the same plain white wall, the same direct gaze. She took a breath. "Gerald," she said, and then she stopped, her eyes shifting to something off camera. Her expression changed, a flicker of surprise, then recognition, then something that looked like fear. The screen went black. The file was cut again. The same brutal mid-sentence erasure, as though someone had known exactly what Margaret was about to say and had made absolutely certain I would never hear it. My hands were no longer shaking. They had gone completely still, the way hands go still when the body understands that shaking is no longer an appropriate response to what is happening. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a long moment, breathing. Then I picked up Margaret's letter, unfolded it, and read her instructions again. Go to the old tea house. Tomorrow, I thought. First thing tomorrow. He did not sleep that night. He lay in the bed Margaret and I had shared for 40 years, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I had ever had with Jessica, every visit, every phone call, every moment I had believed she was taking care of me. He thought about the way she had looked at me over the dinner table on my birthday, her eyes warm and loving, her hand reaching out to squeeze mine. I thought about the way she had sat beside me at Margaret's memorial service, her arm around my shoulders, whispering that everything was going to be okay. I thought about all of it, the years of devotion, the careful attention, the endless small kindnesses, and I tried to reconcile it with the cold, calculated scheme I had just uncovered. He could not reconcile it. The two versions of Jessica did not fit together. One was the daughter I had raised, the woman I had been so proud of. The other was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. He did not know which one was real. He did not know if I would ever know. At 5 de la mañana, I gave up on sleep. He showered, dressed, and made myself a cup of tea that I did not drink. He sat at the kitchen table and watched the sun rise over Westbrook, the first pale light creeping over the horizon, the maple trees catching fire with the gold and crimson of November, the world going about its business as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Everything was different now. I left the house at 7 de la mañana. The drive to the Willow Tree Tea House took 20 minutes. It was a small, unassuming building on Elm Street, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. It had been there for as long as I could remember, a local institution, the kind of place where generations of Westbrook residents had come for tea and conversation. Margaret and I had come here on our first date. We had come here on our 10th anniversary. We had come here on the day we told Jessica we were going to be grandparents. It was a place full of memories, both happy and painful, and I had not been back since Margaret's death. He parked across the street and sat in the car for a long moment, looking at the familiar facade. The sign above the door was the same, a willow tree painted in faded green, the words Willow Tree Tea House curling beneath it. The windows were the same. Large panes of glass that let in the morning light, revealing the warm interior with its mismatched chairs and old wooden tables. He had not been here in 3 years. He had not been able to bring myself to come. But Margaret had asked me to come, and so I was here. He got out of the car and crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed as I pushed it open, the same bell that had chimed on every visit I had ever made. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. She was young, perhaps 25, with kind eyes and a friendly face. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome. Sit anywhere you like." He nodded and walked to the back of the room, to the corner booth where Margaret and I had sat on our first date. The booth was empty, as if it had been waiting for me. He slid into the seat. The vinyl was cracked and worn, the same as it had been 40 years ago. The table was the same, scarred with the marks of countless cups and plates. The view out the window was the same, the old oak tree that had stood on the corner of elm and maple for 100 years, its branches now bare in the November cold. He sat there, in that booth, and I waited. He did not know what I was waiting for. He only knew that Margaret had told me to come here, and so I would wait as long as it took. 20 minutes passed. 10:30. The woman behind the counter brought me a cup of Earl Grey, my usual order, though I had not told her what I wanted. She must have remembered me from all those years ago. I thanked her and wrapped my hands around the warm cup, grateful for the heat. The tea was strong and fragrant, exactly the way Margaret used to make it. He took a sip and felt something loosen in my chest. The door chimed again. He looked up, expecting another customer, but the person who walked through the door was not a customer. It was a man, perhaps 65, with gray hair and kind eyes and a face I did not recognize. He walked straight toward my booth, as if he knew exactly where I was sitting. He stopped at the edge of the table and looked down at me with an expression that was part sympathy and part something else, something I could not quite name. "Mr. Harrison," he said. "That's me. My name is Daniel Morris. I'm an old friend of Margaret's." He gestured to the seat across from me. "May I?" He nodded, and he slid into the booth. He set a small envelope on the table between us. Blanc-white, unmarked, the same size as the envelope I had received from Arthur Connolly at the post office. "Margaret asked me to give this to you today," he said. She was very clear about the date. He stared at the envelope. My hands were trembling again. "Did you know Arthur Connolly?" he asked. "The man at the post office?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. Arthur and I both worked with Margaret on this. She trusted us completely." "Worked with her on what?" "On getting you the truth," Daniel said simply. "She knew you would need help. She knew you would need people you could trust. She asked Arthur to deliver the package. She asked me to deliver this." It pushed the envelope toward me. "Open it when you're ready." He broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Margaret's familiar handwriting. He read it once, and then I read it again, because my brain could not quite process what I was seeing. "Robert, if you're reading this, then I am no longer with you. But I want you to know that I did not leave you willingly. He left because I had to. He left because Jessica was watching everything, and if I had stayed, she would have destroyed you. You know what she did? I know about the money, the forged signatures, the psychiatric evaluation. You know everything. You also know that you will be angry. You will be confused. You will wonder why I didn't tell you while I was alive. The answer is simple. He couldn't. Jessica had cameras in the house. She had software on your phone and your computer. Every conversation we had, she would have known about it within hours. If I had told you directly, the evidence would have disappeared before we could act on it. So I did the only thing I could do. I let her believe she had won. I stepped away. I went into hiding. That I am not dead, Robert. I am alive. I have been alive for 3 years. I have been living in Chicago, working with the FBI, building a case against Jessica and Samuel Wellington. The woman you buried was not me. There was no body. There was no death certificate. The memorial service was a performance, arranged with the help of people I trusted. I had to let you grieve. I had to let you believe I was gone. It was the only way to protect you. I am coming home. I don't know when I will arrive, but I will come. And when I do, we will face this together. Until then, trust no one. Not Jessica. Not anyone she sends. Trust only the people I have chosen for you, Arthur and Daniel. They will keep you safe. I love you, Robert. I have loved you for 40 years. I will love you for 40 more. What for me? Margaret. I read the letter 3 times. 4 times. The words blurred on the page, and I realized I was crying, great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body and made it impossible to breathe. Daniel sat across from me, silent and patient, waiting for me to process what I had just learned. He could not process it. There was too much information, too many emotions, too many years of grief and loss and longing condensed into a single sheet of paper. Margaret, I said out loud, my voice cracking. She's alive. She is, Daniel said quietly. She's been in Chicago for 3 years, working with the FBI. She wanted to tell you sooner, but she couldn't risk it. Jessica's network is extensive. She had people watching you, monitoring your calls, tracking your movements. If Margaret had contacted you directly, the operation would have been compromised. And everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, would have been for nothing. He looked down at the letter again. The words swam before my eyes, but I forced myself to read them one more time. He will come. We will face this together. She was coming back. After 3 years of grief, after 3 years of believing she was gone forever, she was coming back. He did not know how to feel. He did not know what to do with this information. All I knew was that I had to see her. He had to hold her. He had to know that she was real. Where is she? He asked. When can I see her? She's in Chicago, Daniel said. But she's coming here. She's been planning this for months. The operation is nearing its end. The FBI is ready to move on Jessica and Wellington. They're just waiting for the final pieces to fall into place. A pause. Margaret asked me to tell you that she will contact you soon. She wants to see you. But she needs you to be patient. She needs you to be careful. Jessica is still dangerous. She doesn't know Margaret is alive. She still thinks she's in control. We need to keep it that way for a little while longer. He nodded. He understood. He did not like it, but I understood. What do I need to do? He asked. Go home, Daniel said. Act normal. Jessica will call you tonight, as she always does. Answer the phone. Sound the same as you always sound. Don't give her any reason to suspect that anything has changed. He reached into his pocket and produced a small device, a burner phone, the kind that could not be traced. Use this to communicate with us. Margaret will contact you on this number. Don't use your regular phone for anything related to this. Jessica is monitoring it. He took the phone and slipped it into my pocket. Thank you, I said. Daniel nodded. We're all on your side, Robert. Margaret loves you. She has loved you through all of this. She never stopped loving you. He slid out of the booth and stood, looking down at me with kind eyes. Be careful, he said. We'll be in touch. And then he was gone, walking out of the tea house and into the cold November morning, leaving me alone with the letter and the truth and the impossible hope that my wife was still alive. He sat in the booth for a long time. The tea grew cold. The morning light shifted across the table. The woman behind the counter asked if I wanted a refill, and I shook my head. He could not. The first year after the trial was the hardest. Margaret and I worked through the grief and the anger and the betrayal, trying to rebuild our lives in the aftermath of everything that had happened. We went to counseling. We talked. We cried. We fought. We made up. It was not easy. It was not clean. But slowly, gradually, we began to heal. Some days were better than others. Some days, I would wake up and feel almost normal like the old Robert, the man who had existed before any of this had happened. He would make tea and read the newspaper and sit on the porch and watch the world go by. And then something would remind me. A memory. A photograph. A familiar scent. And the grief would come rushing back, as fresh and painful as the day I had first learned the truth. Margaret understood. She always understood. She had been through it too, in her own way. She had spent 3 years in hiding, 3 years of loneliness and sacrifice, 3 years of watching me from a distance and being unable to reach out. She had her own scars, her own grief, her own pain. We carried them together. We helped each other through the darkest moments. He visited Jessica in prison once. It was the first time I had seen her since the trial. She looked thinner, and her hair was shorter. She wore the prison-issued jumpsuit, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For the first time, she looked like a prisoner. She looked like someone who had lost everything. Hi, Dad, she said quietly. Hi, sweetheart, I said. We sat across from each other at a plastic table, separated by a glass wall. I picked up the phone, and she picked up the other end. There was a long silence. Neither of us knew what to say. There was too much history between us, too much pain, too many words that had been left unsaid. Why did you do it? He finally asked. Why did you do all of this? She looked down at the phone in her hand, and I saw her jaw tighten. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know, she said. I wanted more. He wanted to be more than what I was. He thought I deserved it. He thought I could get away with it. You took from me, I said. You took from your mother. You took from everyone who trusted you. I know, she said. I know. And I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. But that doesn't make it right. She looked up at me, and I saw the tears in her eyes. They were real tears, not the controlled performance she had perfected over the years. They were the tears of a woman who had finally been stripped of all her defenses, who had nothing left to hide behind. That, she said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He never wanted to hurt you. He never wanted to hurt Mom. He just got lost. I got lost and I couldn't find my way back. I looked at my daughter, this woman who had done so much harm, who had destroyed so many lives, who had nearly destroyed mine. And I felt the love I had always felt for her, mixed with the anger and the grief and the betrayal. It was a complicated feeling. It was a feeling I would never fully resolve. But I knew one thing for certain, she was still my daughter. She would always be my daughter. And as much as I wanted to hate her, I could not. I love you, Jessica, I said. You're my daughter. I will always love you. But what you did was wrong. What you did was unforgivable. And you have to live with that. I know, she said, tears streaming down her face. I know. And I will. I live with it every single day for the rest of my life. I love you too, Dad, she said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I nodded, and then I hung up the phone and walked away. I could not stay. There was too much pain in that room, too much history, too much everything. I walked out of the prison and into the sunshine, and I did not look back. Margaret was waiting for me in the car. She did not ask how it went. She just reached over and took my hand, and I squeezed it and held on. We drove home in silence, the weight of the visit settling over us like a heavy blanket. It was not a comfortable silence, but it was a shared one. We had both been through so much. We had both lost so much. But we had each other. That was what mattered. The months passed. Margaret and I settled into a new routine. We sold the house on Maple Avenue and moved to a smaller place on the other side of town. It was not the same, it would never be the same, but it was ours. We filled it with new memories. Cooking dinner together, even though neither of us had ever been a good cook. Watching old movies on rainy afternoons. Sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. We talked about the past, but we also talked about the future. We made plans, small plans like planting a garden in the spring, and bigger plans like taking a trip to Europe when we were ready. We dreamed about what our lives would look like, now that the nightmare was finally over. It was not the life we had imagined 40 years ago, it was not even the life we had imagined 3 years ago, but it was a life. And we were grateful for it. The scars of everything that had happened were still there. They would always be there. There were days when the grief would come back, unbidden and unwelcome, and I would find myself sitting in the dark, thinking about Jessica, wondering if I could have done something differently, wondering if I had failed her somehow. Margaret would find me there, and she would sit beside me and hold my hand, and we would wait for the storm to pass. It always did. It always passed. There were also days when I thought about Arthur Connolly and Daniel Morris, the men who had helped Margaret when she needed them most. He had never really thanked them properly. He had never told them how much their courage and loyalty had meant to me. So one afternoon, I called them both and invited them to dinner. Arthur and Daniel came to our new house, and we sat around the table and talked and laughed and cried. We told stories about Margaret, about the old days, about everything we had been through. And when the evening ended, I shook their hands and thanked them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, I said to Arthur, for keeping the package safe, for delivering it to me, for everything. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I was honored to do it, Robert. Margaret is one of the finest people I have ever known. He would do anything for her. I know, I said. And I will never forget it. I turned to Daniel and shook his hand. "Thank you," I said. "For taking care of her. For keeping her safe." Ismail. "She took care of herself. He just helped a little." "You helped more than a little," I said. "And I am grateful." A year after the trial, Margaret and I finally took that trip to Europe. We visited England, where she had always wanted to go. We walked through the streets of London, holding hands like we were young again. We visited the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace and the British Museum. We drank tea in small cafes and watched the rain fall over the city. It was everything we had ever dreamed of, and more. One evening, we were sitting on a bench overlooking the Thames, watching the sun set over the water. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold, and the city was quiet and peaceful. Margaret leaned her head against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. "It's beautiful," she said. "It really is," I agreed. "I wish we had done this sooner." "We have time," she said. "We have all the time in the world." "Do we?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "We do." She looked up at me, and I saw the love in her eyes, the same love that had been there 40 years ago, the same love that had never faded. "We have time, Robert. We have each other. That's all that matters." I leaned down and kissed her, right there on the bench in London, with the sunset behind us and the whole world ahead of us. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a romantic movie moment. It was just us, two old people who had been through hell and back, sitting together and loving each other. And it was perfect. When we returned home, I found a letter waiting for me. It was from Jessica. He opened it with trembling hands and read it alone in my study. "Dear Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. You know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I wanted to write to you anyway, to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for the money. I'm sorry for making you believe that Mom was dead. I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. I think about you every day. I think about all the times you were there for me, all the sacrifices you made, all the love you gave me. And I think about how I repaid you. With betrayal. With deception. With cruelty. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make things right. I don't know if I'll ever be able to earn back your trust. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm trying to find a way to live with myself. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that I love you. I have always loved you. And I am sorry. Love, Jessica. I read the letter twice, and then a third time. I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, next to the letter Margaret had left for me at the tea house. I did not know if I would ever respond. I did not know if I could. But I kept the letter. I kept it because it was a reminder that my daughter was still there, somewhere, buried beneath all the choices she had made. I kept it because it was a reminder that love did not disappear, even when everything else did. 5 years after the trial, I received a call from the prison. Jessica had been granted early release for good behavior. She had completed her education while incarcerated. She had earned a degree in psychology. She had become a peer counselor, helping other prisoners work through their issues. She had, in her own way, found redemption. He went to pick her up from the prison. She walked out through the gates, and I saw the woman she had become. She was still thin, but she had color in her cheeks. Her hair was longer, and she wore a simple dress that looked new. She walked toward me with a tentative smile, and I opened my arms and hugged her. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Welcome home." We drove back to Westbrook in silence. It was a long drive, and there was much to say, but neither of us knew where to start. Finally, Jessica spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't expect you to trust me. I just want to be part of your life again. If you'll let me." He looked at her, this woman who had caused so much pain, who had taken so much from us. And I thought about everything she had been through, everything she had lost, everything she had tried to rebuild. "You're my daughter," I said. "You will always be my daughter. And I will always love you. But trust takes time. It takes work. It takes proving yourself." "I know," she said. "I know. And I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to prove myself. Whatever it takes." "We'll see," I said. "We'll take it one day at a time." She nodded, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was a small glimmer, a tentative one. But it was there. And it was enough. Margaret and I invited Jessica to live with us while she got back on her feet. It was not an easy decision. There were lingering doubts, residual fears, old wounds that had not fully healed. But we decided to give her a chance. We decided to believe that people could change, that redemption was possible, that love could overcome even the worst betrayals. At first, it was awkward. There were long silences at the dinner table. There were conversations that ended abruptly. There were moments when I would look at Jessica and see the woman who had tried to destroy me, and I would feel the old anger and grief rising up. But gradually, slowly, things began to change. Jessica worked hard. She found a job, started going to therapy, began rebuilding her life. She made amends as best she could, apologizing not with words but with actions. She showed up. She was present. She tried. And slowly, she began to earn back our trust. It was not a linear process. There were setbacks. There were moments when she would slip back into old habits, when the old Jessica would resurface and I would wonder if she had changed at all. But each time, she would catch herself and correct course. Each time, she would apologize and try again. And each time, I saw the effort she was making, the work she was doing to become a better person. Margaret was more skeptical than I was. She had seen what Jessica was capable of. She had been the one who had uncovered the truth, who had spent 3 years in hiding, who had sacrificed everything to bring Jessica to justice. It was harder for her to trust, harder for her to forgive. But she tried. For me. For our family. For the hope that we could heal. 3 years after Jessica's release, we had a family dinner. It was a small gathering, just the 3 of us, but it was significant. It was the first time we had all sat down together as a family since before the trial. Margaret cooked her famous roast chicken, and I made my grandmother's apple pie for dessert. We ate and talked and laughed, and for a few hours, we were a family again. After dinner, Jessica stood up and raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she said. "To Mom and Dad. For giving me a second chance. For believing in me when I didn't deserve it. For never giving up on me. She looked at us, her eyes glistening. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm grateful. Every single day, I'm grateful. And I promise that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love. Margaret reached over and took my hand. He looked at her, and I saw the tears in her eyes. Then she looked at Jessica and smiled. We love you, she said. We have always loved you. And we will always love you. Jessica set down her glass and walked over to us. She hugged her mother first, then me. We stood there in the kitchen, the three of us, holding each other. It was not perfect. It was not the happy ending you see in movies. But it was real. It was ours. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized how blind love can make a man. He trusted too completely. He looked at Jessica and saw only my daughter, never the calculation behind her eyes, never the architecture she was quietly building around me. He had been so consumed by grief, so lost in my own pain, that I had failed to see the truth that was right in front of me. But I had learned. He had learned that love without wisdom was just a door left open. He had learned that family betrayal rarely arrives announced. It arrives wearing a warm smile and offering to help with your finances. He had learned that the people you love most can also be the ones who hurt you the most. And I had learned that forgiveness, when it comes, is not a gift you give to the other person. It is a gift you give to yourself. He also learned that truth has a way of surviving no matter how carefully it is buried. Margaret had refused to let the truth die. She had sacrificed everything, her comfort, her safety, her very identity, to bring the truth to light. And in doing so, she had saved me. She had saved our family. She had shown me that love was not just about the easy times. It was about the hard times too. It was about showing up, even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. Now, years later, I sit on the porch of our small house, watching the sunset with Margaret beside me. Jessica is coming for dinner tonight. She has a new job, a new apartment, a new life. She is not the same person she was. None of us are. We have all been changed by what happened. But we are still here. We are still together. We are still a family. And that, I have come to believe, is enough. Margaret reaches over and takes my hand. What are you thinking about? She asks. Everything, I said. Nothing. She smiles. That's a lot. It is, I say. But it's good. It's all good. She squeezes my hand, and I squeeze back. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The world is quiet and peaceful. And for the first time in a very long time, everything feels exactly the way it should be. The first year after the trial was the hardest. Margaret and I worked through the grief and the anger and the betrayal, trying to rebuild our lives in the aftermath of everything that had happened. We went to counseling. We talked. We cried. We fought. We made up. It was not easy. It was not clean. But slowly, gradually, we began to heal. So many days were better than others. So many days, I would wake up and feel almost normal like the old Robert, the man who had existed before any of this had happened. He would make tea and read the newspaper and sit on the porch and watch the world go by. And then something would remind me. A memory. A photograph. A familiar scent. And the grief would come rushing back, as fresh and painful as the day I had first learned the truth. Margaret understood. She always understood. She had been through it too, in her own way. She had spent 3 years in hiding, 3 years of loneliness and sacrifice, 3 years of watching me from a distance and being unable to reach out. She had her own scars, her own grief, her own pain. We carried them together. We helped each other through the darkest moments. There were nights when I would wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that everything had been a dream, that Margaret was still dead and I was still alone. Those nights were the hardest. I would reach for her in the darkness, my hand shaking, my heart pounding, and I would feel the warmth of her body beside me. She would stir and reach back, her fingers finding mine in the dark. "I'm here," she would whisper. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And I would hold on to her, gripping her hand like a lifeline, and wait for the panic to pass. It always passed. It always did. But it took time. It took patience. It took learning to trust that she was really there, that she was really back, that this was not another cruel trick of my grieving mind. Margaret had her own struggles. She had spent 3 years living under a false identity, looking over her shoulder, never knowing if she would be discovered. That kind of fear leaves marks on a person. Sometimes she would startle at unexpected noises. Sometimes she would check the locks on the doors multiple times before she could relax. Sometimes she would look at me with a sadness in her eyes that I could not quite reach. "I missed so much," she said one evening, sitting on the porch beside me. 3 years of your life. 3 years of our life together. I missed your birthday. I missed our anniversary. I missed the simple things, like sitting here with you and watching the sunset. You were doing what you had to do," I said. "You were protecting me." "Protecting who is?" "I know," she said. "But that doesn't make it easier." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But we have time now. We have all the time in the world to make up for what we lost." She smiled at me, that warm, familiar smile that had made me fall in love with her all those years ago. "You always know what to say," she said. "I don't," I said honestly. "I just say what I feel." "That's what makes it perfect," she said. We started going to counseling together. It was not something I had ever imagined doing, but I knew we needed it. We needed help navigating the complex emotions that came with rebuilding a marriage after so much betrayal and loss. The counselor, Dr. Evelyn Hart, was a kind woman in her 60s who had been working with couples for over 30 years. She listened to our story without judgment and helped us find the words to express what we were feeling. "You've been through something extraordinary," she said in one of our early sessions. "Most couples never have to face what you faced. And yet you're still here. You're still together. That says something about the strength of your relationship." "It doesn't always feel strong," Margaret admitted. "Sometimes it feels like we're just holding on by a thread." "That's understandable," Dr. Hart said. "You've both been through trauma. And trauma changes people. It changes how you see the world. It changes how you see each other. How do we fix that?" he asked. "You don't fix it," she said. "You learn to live with it. You learn to integrate it into your lives in a way that doesn't destroy you. And you learn to communicate. Communication is the key. If you can talk to each other, really talk, then you can get through anything." What if we don't know how to talk anymore? Margaret asked. Then you learn, Dr. Hart said gently. It's never too late to learn how to communicate. We took her advice to heart. We started having conversations that we had been avoiding for years. We talked about the anger we felt, the grief, the fear. We talked about the dreams we had for the future. We talked about our childhoods, our parents, the things that had shaped us into the people we were. It was not easy. There were tears. There were raised voices. There were moments when one of us would storm out of the room and need time to calm down. But we always came back. We always found our way back to each other. That was the most important lesson we learned. That even when things were hard, even when we were angry or hurt or scared, we could always find our way back to each other. Love was the thread that held us together. And that thread could not be broken, no matter how many times we pulled at it. After a year of counseling, we felt ready to take the next step. We sold the house on Maple Avenue and moved to a smaller place on the other side of town. It was a modest house, nothing fancy, but it was ours. We had chosen it together, and we had decorated it together, and it felt like a fresh start. The garden was small but full of potential, and Margaret spent hours planting flowers and vegetables. I spent hours on the porch, reading and watching the world go by. It was a quiet life, but it was a peaceful one. And after everything we had been through, peace was exactly what we needed. We started making plans for the future. Small plans at first, like planting a garden in the spring and painting the living room a new color. Then bigger plans, like taking a trip to Europe, something we had always talked about but never done. I want to see England, Margaret said one evening. I've always wanted to go there. You want to walk through the streets of London and drink tea in small cafes and watch the rain fall over the city. Then we'll go, I said. We'll go as soon as we're ready. When will we be ready? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. But we'll know when the time is right. She smiled and nodded, and we went back to planning our quiet, peaceful life. But even in the quiet moments, the past was never far away. There were days when I would look at Margaret and see the face of a woman who had been through too much, a woman who had sacrificed everything to protect me. And I would feel a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. He had come so close to losing her. He had believed she was dead for 3 years. And now she was here, beside me, alive and real and whole. He would reach for her hand, and she would squeeze it, and I would remind myself that this was real, that she was real, that we had made it through the worst of it. There were also days when I thought about Jessica. The trial was over. She had been sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. The daughter I had raised was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing her face. But even so, I could not stop loving her. She was still my daughter. She would always be my daughter. And as much as I wanted to hate her, I could not. He visited her in prison once, and it was the hardest thing I had ever done. He drove to the facility on a cold winter morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. He had not seen Jessica since the trial, and I did not know what to expect. Would she be angry? Defiant? Remorseful? He did not know, and that uncertainty made my stomach churn. When I walked into the visitation room, I saw her sitting at a plastic table, waiting for me. She looked thinner, and her hair was shorter. She wore the prison-issued jumpsuit, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She did not look like the confident, successful woman I had known. She looked like someone who had lost everything. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. He sat down across from her, separated by a glass wall. I picked up the phone on my side, and she picked up hers. "I didn't think you would come," she said. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I needed to see you." He needed to understand. "Understand what?" she asked. "Why you did it? Why you did all of this?" She looked down at the phone in her hand, and I saw her jaw tighten. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she said. "I thought I knew." He thought I had it all figured out. But I don't know anymore. "You took from me," I said. "You took from your mother. You took from everyone who trusted you. You destroyed lives, Jessica. You destroyed our family." "I know," she said. "I know. And I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "But that doesn't make it right." She looked up at me, and I saw the tears in her eyes. They were real tears, not the controlled performance she had perfected over the years. "I was jealous of Mom," she said. "I was jealous of everything she had. Her intelligence. Her strength. The way you looked at her, like she was the most important person in the world. He wanted that. He wanted someone to look at me that way. And when I couldn't get it, I tried to take it." "That's not how love works," I said. "Love isn't something you take. It's something you earn. It's something you give." "I know that now," she said. "I didn't know it then." He was so lost. He was so desperate to be something I wasn't. "What were you trying to be?" he asked. "Successful," she said. "Important. Someone who mattered." He thought if I could be rich, if I could be powerful, if I could build something that people would admire, then maybe I would finally feel like I was enough. But it was never enough. It was never going to be enough. "And now?" he asked. "What are you trying to be now?" "Better," she said. "I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm trying to find a way to live with myself." "That's a good start," I said. "But it's just a start. You have a long way to go." "I know," she said. "And I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to prove myself. Whatever it takes." He looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had caused so much pain. And I felt the love I had always felt for her, mixed with the anger and the grief and the betrayal. It was a complicated feeling, one I would never fully resolve. "I love you, Jessica," I said. "You're my daughter. He will always love you. But what you did was wrong. What you did was unforgivable. And you have to live with that." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And I will. I live with it every single day for the rest of my life." "I love you too, Dad," she said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He nodded, and then I hung up the phone and walked away. He could not stay. There was too much pain in that room, too much history, too much everything. He walked out of the prison and into the cold winter air, and I did not look back. Margaret was waiting for me in the car. She did not ask how it went. She just reached over and took my hand, and I squeezed it and held on. We drove home in silence, the weight of the visit settling over us like a heavy blanket. It was not a comfortable silence, but it was a shared one. We had both been through so much. We had both lost so much. But we had each other. That was what mattered. I'm glad you went, Margaret said finally. I think she needed to see you. I think I needed to see her too, I admitted. I needed to see for myself what she had become. And what did you see? She asked. I saw someone who is lost, I said. Someone who made terrible choices and is now trying to find her way back. I don't know if she'll ever succeed. But I saw her trying. And that's something. Margaret nodded. That's more than I would have given her, she said honestly. But you're a better person than I am. I don't know about that, I said. I think you've just been through more than I have. She smiled faintly. Maybe we've both been through enough, she said. Maybe it's time to start thinking about the future instead of the past. That sounds like a good idea, I said. Let's start thinking about the future. And so we did. We started planning our trip to Europe. We spent hours looking at maps and guidebooks, dreaming about all the places we would visit. London first, then Paris, then Rome. We would drink tea in small cafes, eat fresh bread and cheese, watch the sunset over the Seine. It was a dream, but it was a dream we were determined to make real. It took us 6 months to save enough money and arrange everything. But finally, in the spring of the following year, we boarded a plane and flew across the Atlantic. It was the first time I had ever been to Europe, and the first time Margaret had been in decades. The excitement was almost overwhelming. When we arrived in London, we stepped out of the airport and into a world that felt both foreign and familiar. The streets were narrow and winding, the buildings ancient and grand. We walked through the city hand in hand, taking in everything, the history, the culture, the beauty. We visited the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace and the British Museum. We drank tea in small cafes and watched the rain fall over the city. It was everything we had ever dreamed of, and more. One evening, we were sitting on a bench overlooking the Thames, watching the sun set over the water. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold, and the city was quiet and peaceful. Margaret leaned her head against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. It's beautiful, she said. It really is, I agreed. I wish we had done this sooner. We have time, she said. We have all the time in the world. Do we? He asked. Yes, she said. We do. She looked up at me, and I saw the love in her eyes, the same love that had been there 40 years ago, the same love that had never faded. We have time, Robert. We have each other. That's all that matters. He leaned down and kissed her, right there on the bench in London, with the sunset behind us and the whole world ahead of us. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a romantic movie moment. It was just us, two old people who had been through hell and back, sitting together and loving each other. And it was perfect. When we returned home, I found a letter waiting for me. It was from Jessica. He opened it with trembling hands and read it alone in my study. Dear Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I wanted to write to you anyway, to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for the money. I'm sorry for making you believe that Mom was dead. I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. I think about you every day. I think about all the times you were there for me, all the sacrifices you made, all the love you gave me. And I think about how I repaid you. With betrayal. With deception. With cruelty. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make things right. I don't know if I'll ever be able to earn back your trust. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm trying to find a way to live with myself. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that I love you. I have always loved you. And I am sorry. Love, Jessica. I read the letter twice, and then a third time. I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, next to the letter Margaret had left for me at the tea house. I did not know if I would ever respond. I did not know if I could. But I kept the letter. I kept it because it was a reminder that my daughter was still there, somewhere, buried beneath all the choices she had made. I kept it because it was a reminder that love did not disappear, even when everything else did. 5 years after the trial, I received a call from the prison. Jessica had been granted early release for good behavior. She had completed her education while incarcerated. She had earned a degree in psychology. She had become a peer counselor, helping other prisoners work through their issues. She had, in her own way, found redemption. I went to pick her up from the prison on a warm summer morning. The sky was clear, the birds were singing, and the world felt full of possibility. I watched the gates open and saw Jessica walk out. She was still thin, but she had color in her cheeks. Her hair was longer, and she wore a simple dress that looked new. She looked healthy. She looked hopeful. She looked like someone who was ready to start over. She walked toward me with a tentative smile, and I opened my arms and hugged her. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Welcome home." We drove back to Westbrook in silence. It was a long drive, and there was much to say, but neither of us knew where to start. Finally, Jessica spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't expect you to trust me. I just want to be part of your life again. If you'll let me." I looked at her, this woman who had caused so much pain, who had taken so much from us. And I thought about everything she had been through, everything she had lost, everything she had tried to rebuild. "You're my daughter," I said. "You will always be my daughter. And I will always love you. But trust takes time. It takes work. It takes proving yourself." "I know," she said. "I know. And I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to prove myself. Whatever it takes." "We'll see," I said. "We'll take it one day at a time." She nodded, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was a small glimmer, a tentative one. But it was there. And it was enough. Margaret was hesitant when I told her that Jessica was coming to live with us while she got back on her feet. "I don't know if I can do this," she said. "I don't know if I can trust her again." "I know," I said. "I don't know either. But she's our daughter. And she's trying. She deserves a chance to prove herself." "She had a chance," Margaret said. "She had so many chances. And she threw them all away." "I know," I said. "But people can change. She has changed." I saw it in her eyes. "I hope you're right," Margaret said. "For all our sakes, I hope you're right." It was not easy at first. There were long silences at the dinner table. There were conversations that ended abruptly. There were moments when I would look at Jessica and see the woman who had tried to destroy me, and I would feel the old anger and grief rising up. But gradually, slowly, things began to change. Jessica worked hard. She found a job at a local bookstore, and she started going to therapy. She made amends as best she could, apologizing not with words but with actions. She showed up. She was present. She tried. And slowly, she began to earn back our trust. There were setbacks. There were moments when she would slip back into old habits, when the old Jessica would resurface and I would wonder if she had changed at all. But each time, she would catch herself and correct course. Each time, she would apologize and try again. And each time, I saw the effort she was making, the work she was doing to become a better person. 3 years after Jessica's release, we had a family dinner. It was a small gathering, just the three of us, but it was significant. It was the first time we had all sat down together as a family since before the trial. Margaret cooked her famous roast chicken, and I made my grandmother's apple pie for dessert. We ate and talked and laughed, and for a few hours, we were a family again. After dinner, Jessica stood up and raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she said. "To Mom and Dad. For giving me a second chance. For believing in me when I didn't deserve it. For never giving up on me." She looked at us, her eyes glistening. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm grateful. Every single day, I'm grateful. And I promise that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love." Margaret reached over and took my hand. He looked at her, and I saw the tears in her eyes. Then she looked at Jessica and smiled. "We love you," she said. "We have always loved you. And we will always love you." Jessica set down her glass and walked over to us. She hugged her mother first, then me. We stood there in the kitchen, the three of us, holding each other. It was not perfect. It was not the happy ending you see in movies. But it was real. It was ours. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized how blind love can make a man. He trusted too completely. He looked at Jessica and saw only my daughter, never the calculation behind her eyes, never the architecture she was quietly building around me. He had been so consumed by grief, so lost in my own pain, that I had failed to see the truth that was right in front of me. But I had learned. He had learned that love without wisdom was just a door left open. He had learned that family betrayal rarely arrives announced. It arrives wearing a warm smile and offering to help with your finances. He had learned that the people you love most can also be the ones who hurt you the most. And I had learned that forgiveness, when it comes, is not a gift you give to the other person. It is a gift you give to yourself. He also learned that truth has a way of surviving no matter how carefully it is buried. Margaret had refused to let the truth die. She had sacrificed everything, her comfort, her safety, her very identity, to bring the truth to light. And in doing so, she had saved me. She had saved our family. She had shown me that love was not just about the easy times. It was about the hard times too. It was about showing up, even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. Now, years later, I sit on the porch of our small house, watching the sunset with Margaret beside me. Jessica is coming for dinner tonight. She has a new job, a new apartment, a new life. She is not the same person she was. None of us are. We have all been changed by what happened. But we are still here. We are still together. We are still a family. And that, I have come to believe, is enough. Margaret reaches over and takes my hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "Everything," I said. "Nothing." She smiles. "That's a lot." "It is," I say. "But it's good. It's all good." She squeezes my hand, and I squeeze back. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The world is quiet and peaceful. And for the first time in a very long time, everything feels exactly the way it should be. The years continue to pass, each one bringing its own gifts and challenges. Margaret and I had settled into a quiet rhythm, our days filled with simple pleasures and small joys. We woke up each morning to the sound of birds outside our window, and we made tea together, sitting at the kitchen table and watching the sun rise over the garden. We spent our afternoons reading, gardening, taking long walks through the neighborhood. We spent our evenings on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. It was a simple life, but it was a full one. It was a life built on love and trust and the hard-won peace that comes from surviving the worst and still choosing to hope. Jessica had become a regular part of our lives again. She came for dinner every Sunday, and we talked and laughed and shared stories. She had found a new job as a counselor at a community center, helping young people who had lost their way. She had found a new purpose, a new reason to get up in the morning. She had found a way to turn her past mistakes into something meaningful. Thomas, her husband, was a kind and patient man. He worked as a teacher at the local high school, and he had a gentle way of bringing out the best in people. A and Jessica had been married for 3 years now, and they were expecting their first child. The news had come as a surprise, but it was a welcome one. Margaret had cried when Jessica told us, tears of joy and relief and hope for the future. "I'm going to be a grandmother," she had said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I would get to be a grandmother." "You deserve it," I had said, pulling her into a hug. "You deserve all the joy in the world." The baby was born on a warm summer evening, a healthy baby girl with dark hair and bright eyes. They named her Eleanor, after Margaret. It was a gesture that touched both of us deeply, a sign that Jessica had truly moved past the anger and resentment that had once consumed her. "I wanted to honor her," Jessica had said, holding her newborn daughter in her arms. "I wanted to give her a name that meant something." "It means everything," Margaret had said, tears streaming down her face. "It means everything." We spent many hours at Jessica and Thomas's house, helping with the baby, watching her grow, marveling at the miracle of new life. Eleanor was a happy baby, always smiling, always reaching out for someone to hold her. She had a special bond with Margaret, a connection that seemed to transcend words. Margaret would hold her for hours, singing lullabies and telling her stories about the world. "She looks just like you," I said one afternoon, watching Margaret rock the baby in her arms. "She has your eyes. She has your kindness," Margaret replied, smiling. "She's going to be a wonderful person." "She already is," I said. "She already is." As the years passed, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey we had been through. The grief, the betrayal, the loss, the redemption. It had all shaped us, molded us, made us into the people we were today. I thought about Jessica, about the choices she had made and the consequences she had faced. I thought about Margaret, about the sacrifices she had made and the strength she had shown. I thought about myself, about the blindness that had once consumed me and the wisdom I had gained in its wake. I had learned so much over the course of my life. I had learned that love was not always easy, that it required work and sacrifice and a willingness to forgive. He had learned that trust was fragile, that it could be broken in an instant and take years to rebuild. He had learned that people could change, that redemption was possible, that even the worst mistakes could be overcome with enough effort and determination. He had learned that the most important thing in life was not wealth or success, but the relationships we built and the love we shared. Margaret and I spent our days together, savoring every moment we had left. We knew that time was precious, that we had been given a second chance that few people ever receive. We did not waste it. We traveled to new places, tried new things, made new memories. We visited the Grand Canyon, where we had gone on our honeymoon all those years ago. We walked along the rim, holding hands, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of orange and red and gold. "It's still just as beautiful as I remember," Margaret said. "It's even more beautiful," I replied. "Because I'm here with you." We visited the coast, where we had spent so many summer vacations with our children. We walked along the beach, feeling the sand between our toes and the salt spray on our faces. We watched the waves crash against the shore and listened to the seagulls calling overhead. It was a reminder of the simplicity and beauty of life, of the joy that could be found in the smallest moments. "I'm glad we did this," Margaret said. "I'm glad we came back." "So am I said. "So am me." We also spent time with our family. Jessica and Thomas came to visit often, bringing little Eleanor with them. We watched her grow from a baby into a toddler, then into a young girl with a curious mind and a kind heart. She reminded me so much of Margaret, with her intelligence and her warmth and her unshakable optimism. "Grandma, tell me a story," she would say, climbing into Margaret's lap. And Margaret would tell her stories about the old days, about the adventures she had been on and the people she had met. Eleanor would listen with wide eyes, hanging on every word. "I want to be just like you when I grow up," she would say. "You already are," Margaret would reply, kissing her forehead. "You already are." Margaret's health had begun to decline in her later years. It was a slow and gradual process, a natural part of aging. She had trouble walking, and she needed more rest than she used to. But her spirit remained strong, her mind sharp, her heart full of love. "I'm not afraid," she told me one evening, sitting on the porch as the sun went down. "I'm not afraid of what comes next." "Neither am I said. "I just want to be with you. For as long as I can." "You will be," she said. "I'll always be with you. Even when I'm gone." "Don't talk like that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're not going anywhere." "I know," she said softly. "But I want you to be ready. I want you to know that I love you. I have always loved you. And I will always love you." The day came when Margaret was no longer able to care for herself. We had known it was coming, but it still felt like a blow. I made the decision to care for her at home, with the help of a nurse who came 3 times a week. I wanted to be with her, to hold her hand, to make sure she knew she was not alone. "You don't have to do this," she said one afternoon, her voice weak but clear. "You can put me in a home. You don't have to carry this burden." "You are not a burden," I said firmly. "You are my wife. And I will take care of you for as long as I can." "I love you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," I said. "More than you will ever know." He spent those final months caring for her, making sure she was comfortable and happy. We talked about old times, about the memories we had made and the love we had shared. We talked about our children, our grandchildren, our hopes for the future. We held each other, and we cried, and we laughed, and we cherished every moment we had together. "I'm ready," she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm ready to go." "Not yet," I said, holding her hand. "Not yet." "It's okay," she said. "I'm not afraid." eBay had a good laugh. eBay had a wonderful laugh. "And I've had you." "You've had me," I said. "And I've had you. And I will always be grateful for that." She smiled, that same warm smile that had made me fall in love with her all those years ago. "I'll be waiting for you," she said. "When it's your turn, I'll be waiting for you." "I'll be there," I said. "I'll be there." Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 days later. I was holding her hand when she left, watching her face relax into a serene and peaceful expression. I knew she was gone. I could feel it in my heart, a hollow ache that would never quite heal. But I was grateful. Grateful for the time we had shared, the love we had built, the memories we had made. Grateful that I had been with her in her final moments, that she had not been alone. The funeral was small and intimate, just family and close friends. Jessica spoke about her mother, about the strength and courage she had shown, about the love she had given so freely. "She taught me so much," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "She taught me that love was not about perfection. It was about showing up, even when showing up was hard. It was about forgiveness, even when forgiveness seemed impossible. It was about hope, even when hope seemed lost. I will carry her lessons with me for the rest of my life." After the service, I stood alone at her grave, looking down at the headstone. It was a simple stone, engraved with her name and the dates of her life. Beneath it were the words, "Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." She lived with courage, loved with passion, and taught us all how to be better. He knelt down and placed a single white rose on the grave. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for everything. He will love you forever." The months after Margaret's death were the hardest of my life. He was alone again, in a way I had not been since before I met her. But I was not the same man I had been when she first died. He had learned to live with grief, to carry it without letting it consume me. He had learned to find joy in the small things, in the memories we had shared, in the love we had built. He had learned that death was not the end, but a transition. A passage from one life to the next. He continued to live in the house we had shared, filling my days with simple routines and quiet pleasures. He gardened in the spring, read in the summer, walked in the autumn, and sat by the fire in the winter. He visited Jessica and Thomas and Eleanor, watching as their family grew and flourished. He was present in their lives, a source of love and support, just as Margaret would have wanted. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. It was a beautiful evening, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink and gold. He thought about Margaret, about all the years we had spent together, all the love we had shared. He thought about Jessica, about the journey she had taken from betrayal to redemption. He thought about Eleanor, about the future she would have, the life she would build. And I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a deep and abiding contentment that I had not felt in a long time. "I did it, Margaret," I whispered to the sky. "I did what you asked." He kept going. He kept loving. He kept hoping. And in the silence of the evening, I could almost hear her voice, the same warm voice that had comforted me through so many difficult times. "I knew you would," she seemed to say. I always knew. As I look back on my life, I realized that the most important lesson I have learned is that love is the only thing that truly matters. It is love that sustains us through the darkest times. It is love that gives us the strength to forgive and the courage to hope. It is love that binds us to one another, that makes us human, that gives meaning to our existence. I have been blessed with a life full of love, full of joy, full of meaning. I have been blessed with a wife who loved me unconditionally, a daughter who found her way back to me, and a granddaughter who fills my heart with hope. I have been blessed with friends and family who have supported me through the hardest times and celebrated with me through the best. I have been blessed with a life that, for all its challenges and hardships, has been full and rich and beautiful. And for that, I am endlessly grateful. I still talk to Margaret sometimes, in the quiet moments when the world is still and I can hear my own thoughts. I tell her about my day, about the things I have done and the people I have seen. I tell her about Eleanor, about the young woman she is becoming, about the bright future that lies ahead of her. I tell her about Jessica, about the progress she has made, about the peace she has found. And I tell her about myself, about the contentment I have found, about the love I still carry in my heart. I miss you, I say. I miss you every day. But I know you're with me. I know you're watching over us. And in the silence, I feel her presence, a warm and comforting presence that tells me she is still here, still loving me, still watching over me. Now, as I sit here telling this story, I want to leave you with one final thought. Life is not always easy. It is full of challenges and hardships, full of moments that test our strength and our faith. But it is also full of beauty and love, full of moments that remind us why we keep going, why we keep hoping, why we keep loving. The people we love may hurt us. They may betray us. They may leave us. But love itself is never wasted. Love is always worth the risk. Love is always worth the fight. Love is always worth the pain. Because love is what makes life worth living. It is what gives us purpose. It is what connects us to one another, to the world, to something greater than ourselves. So I ask you, the one reading this story, to hold on to love. Hold on to it tightly, even when it seems impossible, even when it seems hopeless, even when it seems like the world is against you. Because love will carry you through. It will guide you through the darkness and lead you into the light. It will give you the strength to forgive and the courage to hope. It will remind you that no matter what happens, you are never truly alone. As long as there is love, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, there is always a chance for a new beginning. I want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for taking the time to read this story. It has been a long and winding journey, full of twists and turns, moments of sorrow and moments of joy. But I am grateful that you have stayed with me until the end. Your presence here means more than you will ever know. If this story has touched you in any way, if it has made you think, if it has made you feel, I would be honored if you would share it with someone you love. Because stories like this one are meant to be shared. They are meant to remind us that we are not alone, that we are all connected by the threads of love and hope and resilience that bind us together. And if you are willing, I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling me where in the world you are watching or reading from. Whether you are in a bustling city, a quiet village, or somewhere in between, your voice matters. Your presence matters. You matter. Every comment, every city, every country reminds me why stories like this one exist. They remind me that we are all in this together, that we are all navigating the complexities of life, love, and loss, and that we can find strength in each other's stories. If you have not already, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world to me. It allows me to continue creating stories that touch hearts and inspire minds. It reminds me that there is a community of people out there who believe in the power of storytelling, who believe in the importance of connection, who believe in the transformative power of love. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. You are the reason I do what I do. You are the reason I keep telling stories, keep sharing my heart, keep reaching out to connect with people around the world. Thank you, again, for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, no matter how dark the night may seem, the sun will always rise again. Love will always find a way. And hope will always be there, waiting for you to reach out and hold on to it. That is the message of this story. That is the message of my life. And that is the message I want to leave with you today. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And never forget that you are loved, you are valued, and you are never alone.